Thanks for watching Hindsight 101. Click the subscribe button and select the notification bell to stay up to date.
Hello, I'm Derek, and welcome to Hindsight 101, where you'll learn about things that will help you in everyday life. So to replace your anode rod, these are some of the items that you'll need. You won't need all of these, but I wanted to give you options on tools that you could use. So first, in case you need to cut your anode rod because you can't get it out of your water heater, I'll explain later in more detail, but just for right now, you can use power tools, you can use a reciprocating saw, you can use an angle grinder, or you can use a hacksaw. It's totally up to you, whichever one you're more comfortable with, but you may need this. Next, you want a pry bar or just a flathead screwdriver. You might have to pry off this rubber plastic cap that's on your water heater. Either will do just fine. It's just one's gives you a little more leverage. Now you may need needle nose pliers. That's in order to take the rod out of the water heater. Sometimes it's stuck deep in there and you're going to need to pull it out with something and your fingers won't fit. So, and then finally, like I'll say, this is kind of up to you what you feel comfortable with, but to actually break the anode rod loose, because if it's the first time you're taking it off and from the factory, it is stuck on there. So what you can do, you can use a breaker bar. Breaker bar helps. Longer the better, but if you don't, you can get a cheater bar, which is pretty much another piece of piping you put over this, but longer to give you a little more leverage to push with. And then with that, the socket you will need, 1 1/16 socket, or you can use a 27mm socket. It all depends on which you have. And then you can use the breaker bar, but if you don't have a lot of room where you're at, once you break it loose, you're going to use the ratchet to loosen it up or tighten it back down. So, and finally, if it's that hard to take off, I suggest maybe an impact wrench. That's your choice if you want to use it. Remember, it's your water heater and you're shaking it, but sometimes this is the only way you can do to get it off. This is the only way I can get it off. So, just so you know. And then finally, you're going to need a hose. That's just to drain the water, so you can drain it into a hose nearby or wherever outside. It depends on where your water heater is located. So different options. You don't need all these tools, but just some different things in case you do or you do not have it. That's all. Now I'm here at my mom's house. She got this water heater probably about 3 or 4 years ago. So I think it's about time we check on the anode rod. The anode rod is basically a sacrificial rod, so it will rust before your tank does. So it's nice to have, and it'll actually extend the life of your water heater. They come in different types of material. There's magnesium, aluminum, and zinc. I would check the manufacturer specs to find out which one you should get. You can look it up online. Also, it depends on what type of water you have, depending on what type of metal you should get for your anode rod. But look that up. You can check it out. I'll post some links below. So there are different types of, I guess you can say, styles of anode rods that you can use in your home. Like the one that's at my mother's house. I'm currently at my house, by the way. The ones at my mother's house, it's kind of long, straight, and that's all you have. And she has a very high ceiling, so it's easy just to put it in just like that. But if you don't have a lot of clearance, like I have in my home, where between the heating duct and the water heater, I only have a little bit of clearance, to get a long rod like that, it would never work. So what are you going to do? Well, the options are, you can get 2 different styles. The first one's a little more expensive. It's they're kind of a bendable. You can bend it all the way. It's kind of like tethered together by string. It's not, but it kind of seems that way. And you can just bend it however you want. They're very flexible, and that's what I'm going to have to use here. I just bend it and put one in at a time. So the other style is, it's a flex rod, I guess you can call it. And it has, in little sections, it has like little indents where you can bend it. I wouldn't say bend it all the way, but just a little slight bend to say if you needed to get something in at an angle, you could, and then put the rod in to the water heater. So those are the 3 options that you can come by. It all depends on what works best for you. For this one, we can just use any type of rod for this because we have plenty of clearance to put it in. So let's get started. First, what you want to do is turn off the electricity to the water heater. Now with mine, I actually have a panel that I can turn off, but also you may have to go to your circuit breaker panel and turn it off from there. So it just depends on how your home is set up, but I have one right next to my water heater. So from here, I have it already off. You just want to switch it off. So if you have a gas water heater, you're going to have to do something a little different. You're going to want to turn down the gas. So in order to do that, you can put it on vacation. If you put it on vacation, it'll still keep the water warm. But if you turn it to pilot, it won't warm up the water, but it will keep the pilot light on, so you won't have to relight it. Because if you put it to off, you're going to have to relight it. So the best thing is to do, just put it on pilot. I actually turned my water heater off the night before because I'm going to flush my water heater along with replacing the anode rod. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't dealing with scalding hot water. So the water is actually pretty cold right now. That's why you see the switch off already instead of me having to do it now. And I advise you, if you can, to turn it off. It's just a safety precaution measure, as long as if you have a family, they don't mind not having hot water for a while, because it does take a while for it to heat back up. So next you want to turn off the cold water inlet valve. So how you know the difference is one will have a handle and the other one, that's the hot water outtake, is here, and this supplies hot water to your home. So you're going to want to turn off the hot water to this pipe here that goes into your water heater. So now that you turned off the water supply to the water heater, you want to open up the faucet on the hot side to let some of the pressure out. You can leave it open while we go do other things. So next what you want to do is connect a hose to the drain valve. The drain valve is located at the bottom of the water heater. And you want to do this because you want to drain about 3 to 5 gallons of water from the water heater so you can have some headroom at the top to work with the rod. Once this is tight and secure, you can open up the drain valve and let the water out. So this was the original drain valve that was on my water heater and the same one that's on my mom's. The other common one is a brass one that you'd need a flathead screwdriver to open up. Both of these are very small openings. I know you can't see in there, but it even gets even smaller the further in you go. So very little water will come out. So it will take a long time to drain your water heater if you're draining the whole thing. So I actually replaced it with a bulb valve, which has a much bigger opening, so it'll let much more water out, so it only takes like maybe 15-20 minutes to empty the tank I have. So if you run into a situation where even after opening up the hot side of your faucets in your home, the drain valve doesn't drain any water from your water heater, you can also use the pressure release valve. The pressure release valve is a safety feature that if the water heater builds up too much pressure, this will allow that pressure to release so you don't end up with a big mess on your hands, or expensive mess. You want to check these annually just because it is a safety feature, and if it's broken you don't want to find out the hard way and then again end up with a mess. But you don't want to mess with it too much, but you do want to check to make sure it works. So how you do this, you just want to lift up this little valve. So this one has the valve on the top. Mine at my home has it on the side. So it doesn't really matter, but you just want to make sure you have something to catch any water that may spill if you do open this up. And then this one is just connected to the back. So let's open it up. You'll hear some water running out. You kind of want to keep it sticking up to let the pressure out. And then when you're done, you just flip it down and make sure it's seated correctly, because you do not want water flowing out of there. So now we're going to drain about 3 to 5 gallons so we can work on taking out the rod. So now that we've drained the water, we can close this back up. Let's go take out the rod. Now we're going to remove the rod from the water heater. Now to remove the rod from the water heater, you want to go to the top of the unit. In this particular unit, it has a plastic covering over it, and then there's insulation that you're going to have to scrape out. So just take a flathead screwdriver to pry that out, and then also to scrape out the insulation. So this next part is up for debate. There's 2 ways you can remove the rod from the unit. The first way to do that is with a breaker bar, and you want to use a 1 1/16 socket to take it out. And then also, just FYI, you want to use a 6-point, not a 12-point. If you don't know what that means, then basically it just grips the head of the rod a lot better than a 12-point would, because you could strip it. And if you do that, then you're pretty much out of luck. So you see now that the cap is off and the insulation is gone. So I'm just going to drop this in. So, some people will use a cheater bar for this. Basically what a cheater bar is, it's a bar that you would slide onto here and make this longer to get more leverage. I pretty much knew this wasn't going to work because this is a new unit and it was still sealed from the factory. So we're not going to use this because, as you can see, the unit moved. And if you move it too much, you could damage the piping. And this is the part that's up for debate. A lot of people say you shouldn't use an impact wrench on your water heater. And I agree with them, but if it's the only way to take it off, you kind of have to. Now, this is about a 3-year-old unit, so I feel comfortable rattling this thing. But still, that's not a good thing, because this thing rattles quite a bit when you're trying to take this off. If this was a 20-year-old unit, I probably wouldn't do it, or I'd call in a professional or have a backup in place, because if it's something that old, you never know what's going to happen when you start messing with it. Wait, I forgot to mention something. So if you have a home like I do, where you don't have a lot of clearance between the ceiling and the water heater, you're going to have to find a way to get that rod out. I'll show you real quick. So, make believe this is my rod. What you have to do is you take it out as much as you can, and then what you would do is use the tools like I mentioned before. You would use like a little hacksaw, a reciprocating saw, a little small one, or angle grinder. You use at your own discretion, but all those things will cut through the metal. And then you don't want to cut all the way through, because all you want to do is just bend it. And then as you're bending it, you take it out. And then bend, cut, bend, take it out. And just keep taking it out until you get all the pieces out. Now, this is kind of just a FYI, in case you've eaten away too much of the rod, because then it's very thin. What you may want to do is get some vice grips or something to clamp it, so when you're cutting it, and you may cut all the way through, it doesn't drop down in the tank. So, and it'll hold it right there, and then you cut it and then bring the rest of it out, and just keep doing that until you get the whole rod out of the water heater. So, just a quick tip. So once you use the impact wrench to loosen the rod, when you put it back on, you can hand tighten it as tight as you want, so it's easy to get off for the next time. So you don't have to use this every time, just the first time, if this is the first time you're taking it off from the factory. And there you go. So here, I want to show you a different type of water heater if you have a different covering than what's on the other one that I showed with the cap. See, this has kind of a ring around it. So with this, I can fit the socket in just fine, and I can work that in. But if I want to use an impact, it doesn't fit. So what I would have to do is I would have to pry this out all the way around to get it out in order to fit the impact socket in, since they're a little bit thicker. So now we're going to take the rod out. You may need needle nose pliers to take it out, depending on how deep in the rod is. You would just go in just like this, but mine's not too deep, so I can actually just take it out with my fingers. So here's the moment of truth. And as you can see, this one is pretty much gone. How do I know? Because you can compare it to this. It should look like this. So this one is doing its job. It's keeping the tank from being rusted, but it's on its last leg. So like I said, with this I have plenty of room, so I can just take this out and get rid of it. So I'll give you a closer look. This is what it looks like. Yeah. Now we're going to put the new rod in. Like I said before, there are many different types. I have the bendable one. The only reason I got the bendable one is because this is all they had at my hardware store. But really, you can get whichever one fits your needs. I have plenty of clearance, so this will go right in. But you want to make sure that you either put Teflon tape on here or some sealant compound. And it looks like this. Or Teflon tape. I prefer the compound, so that's what I'm going to use. So you just want to take some and apply a layer on the threads, which this will make sure that the water doesn't come out once pressure builds up in the tank. There you go. You want to take a rag and just clean out the inside. Make sure there's no debris on the threads when you put this back in. So now we're just going to drop it in. So you're going to want to thread this by hand at first. Because you don't want to strip the threads. Because if you strip this, cross-thread it, then your tank is done. It may help to use the socket. There we go. So now I'm going to use a ratchet to finish the job. And like I said before, you can tighten this as much as you want. Make sure it's secure so the water doesn't come out, but it doesn't have to be so tight that you can't get it off and you have to use the impact wrench again. Now that we're all done, let's start putting everything back the way it was. Now we can remove the hose from the drain valve, but let's make sure we close it up. I previously closed it up, so we're good. So let's take the hose off. A little bit of water may come out, so you may want a rag. So now we can turn the water back on to the water heater, and also we can turn the power back on to it as well. Now remember, we left the hot water side of the faucet open to let the pressure out. You want to keep it open to let the pressure out until water starts flowing through when we turn the water back on to the water heater. So for the next couple hours, what you want to do is make sure that there's no water coming out of the hole where the rod is. So just make sure you tighten it enough and you put enough sealant or Teflon tape around it. A towel or something down there to see if any water soaks up. Well, like I said, just check back every so often and just see if there's any water for the next couple hours, rest of the day. That's it. It's just that simple. If you have any questions, let me know. Enjoy.